Welcome to the Next Gen Podcast. Stepping up to the microphone are your hosts, Bryson Wright and Alex Winton. They got next, so let's get to the show.
Hello and welcome into the Next Gen Podcast here on the Bluff City Media Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Bryson Wright, and I'm joined by my guy, Alex Winton. And we're going to start with the game as of recording that happened last night. Well, I guess more midday, not really last night. And that is the Grizzlies went to Chicago to play the Bulls. And it was really a tale of two halves, I'd say, because in the first half, the Grizzlies came out, they played really well. They shot over 50% from three. The offense looked awesome. They were firing on all cylinders. And it looked like they were actually going to get a solid one on the road. You know, the Bulls aren't really a top-tier team. They're going to be a play-in team in the East. But it looked like they were on their way to get a road win. And then in the second half, they get outscored 75-39. And it was really that third quarter that it felt like that's what really ended the game. 40-16 in the third quarter. And the third quarter is usually when the Grizzlies are at their best. You know, especially Ja. Ja has been a good third quarter scorer his entire career. But I'll really say, like, in that third quarter, it was really Ja and Dylan, both of them did not play very well. They turned the ball over a lot, took some bad shots. And it kind of felt like that's what got the Bulls back into the game at the beginning of that third quarter. Not to say it's all on just those two, but a lot of those plays in the third quarter, it was with the ball in their hands. And it kind of like, I mean, I think they, when you look at the turnovers in just the third quarter, it was kind of ridiculous. And then turnovers for the game also weren't very good. The turnover differential was absolutely just ridiculous when you think about it. So the Grizzlies turned the ball over 18 times, and the Bulls turned it over 3 on part. But yeah, not a good second half after they had a really good start to the game. But I mean, it happens, and they haven't been good on the road all season. I'm sure that's what you're going to say because you always talk about that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Grizz are usually not good on the road. Like that's why I was surprised when it happened. When it comes to the Grizz on the road, I have to see it to believe it. What I mean by that is until the game is actually over, I don't believe they've won it or felt really comfortable with them on the road because I know they're always gonna lose it because they're not consistent on the road, and they had shown it the whole season. I think we're like 7 games under 500 on the road on the season. Obviously not as bad as the Warriors, but still bad road team compared to the other teams in both conferences. And it really comes down to just being consistent. Like you said, had a great first half, hitting shots. Like I was really surprised they were hitting shots on the road. So I was like, man, like this is crazy. Like, you know, they really might hold on to this. Then third quarter, then the end of the second quarter, I didn't really like. And I was like, man, this is not good. I was like, uh-oh. I'm like, we kind of might be in some trouble. And then third quarter started, and I think Jaren got his third or fourth foul early. And I was like, okay, he went out the game. Then once he went out the game, I was like, ooh. I was like, all right, well, hopefully they should still hold on. But what Ja and DB did in that third quarter was and they couldn't, whether it was Dylan taking the shot they wanted, the Bulls wanted him to take, or whether it was Ja not necessarily being as aggressive as he should have been, and really just making some questionable decisions, obviously, with the ball. They couldn't get a flow offensively again, started missing wide open shots, and then weren't defending either. So then the Bulls just went on a crazy, crazy run, as you mentioned. And it was kind of over after that. Like, even when Jaren and them came back in the fourth, it just felt over because it felt like the whole momentum shifted. And you could argue maybe some of the calls were, you know, questionable, especially like some of the Jaren whistles. But even then, you still should hold on to that lead, even if he goes out, because you still had your two, your three, or 3 of your 4 best players still out there, and they just weren't able to get it done. So they just got to find consistency, man, because we've seen this before with them where they'll play good on the road for a stretch when they'll be bad in the quarter, or they'll be bad for 2 quarters or 3. Like they never really put a good, at least close to a full 48 on the road, you know, to really getting a win. So they really got to get it together, especially for this last week and obviously the weeks going forward in the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. And then when you talk about Jaren and the fouls thing, That's a big narrative around him, obviously, and it looked like he had gotten a lot better with those. But you can definitely see that since Steven Adams has been out, it's been more of an issue again. And I think when you look at it, even last year, there was a lot of talk about his per 36-minute stats with Steven on the court and then without him on the court, and how many more fouls he has when Steven isn't out there. And then I think you also saw that last year during the Timberwolves series when Steven Adams was kind of played off the court. He ended up being in foul trouble a lot more compared to when he was able to play a little bit more in the other games. He didn't get in foul trouble as easily. And I think that that's going to be an issue for him going into the playoffs if Steven Adams doesn't come back. But I think the weirdest thing that people who don't watch the Grizzlies, who just look at the box score and say, oh, Jaren fouls too much. The weird thing about Jaren is he's such a good rim protector that you think a lot of his fouls would come protecting the rim, going for blocks and stuff like that. But I feel like the fouls that always get him in trouble, it's always like offensive fouls or like a foul away from the ball, or he's going for a steal that he probably shouldn't go for. And I think that's the thing that makes it more frustrating, because especially the offensive fouls, because of how important he is on the other end. It's like, dude, you could not get fouls on the offensive side of the ball too, because that's how you end up with 5 fouls with 7. I think he would have fouled out with 7 minutes left. Luckily, they challenged it, and he ended up being able to stay in the game because it was a bad call. But he had 5 fouls already with 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And it's something that he's definitely going to have to continue to get better on. I think that with Steven Adams back, it's going to help a lot. But it's just the offensive fouls and then like the away from the play, going for steal fouls, that if he just can eliminate those, or not eliminate them, just cut it back, because those are the ones that get him in trouble more than anything he does when he's actually protecting the paint.
Yeah. Thing with Jaren, man, it's just the foul calls, man. It's just, again, I always, the thing is, you see a lot of debate and a lot of topic about it with people, like obviously in Grizz Twitter, in terms of talking about his fouls, because it's like they work in absolutes. Either they say it's his fault or it's the ref's fault. They don't ever say it's both. And clearly it's a both thing. And it's always been that throughout his career. Now, obviously, it's been more on him than the refs. But I will say, at least this year, it's more so both. And with Jaren, I feel like a lot of his fouls it all comes down to rep to some degree, but also some of it is about being smarter. So I'll say for the Jaren thing, right? For the Jaren side of it, he has to understand that he can't pick up little ticky-tack, or when he does pick up a ticky-tack foul, he has to understand that I can't do certain things anymore that I wanted to do or be as aggressive. I have to just stay solid, or I have to understand that this game is being called a different way, or I'm being reffed a different way. And I have to understand that I can't be doing the same things that I've been doing, or like may see somebody else not get the same call, making the same type of play defensively, so he feel like he gets to do it, and then ends up getting another foul, which puts him in a bad spot. But also, like you said, with the offensive stuff, he gets a lot of them offensive too. Really using his offhand and not learning how, or really learning how to not use it offhand. And I think a lot of it with him is just he has to be more situationally aware and understand, like, hey, I have 3 right now. I can't do anything crazy defensively, because the thing with him defensively now at this point, he doesn't have to get blocks to be impactful defensively. He can literally just stand there and it's about being getting the spots and just being big, like using your length. And he has to understand that. And I think with him, he's still understanding, because the thing is, he's gotten better each year with his foul rate, right? Like obviously it's gotten back up to, I think, 3.6, maybe 3.7, maybe. But I think the thing for him, at least going into the playoffs, is understanding that like he just has to make the simple play, the boring play. Like it might not be the blocks, but like just being in the help on time and just playing vertical. That might not lead to a block, but that will lead to a miss. And so understanding that, I think is a big part of it. And also with the refs do got to be better, but I feel like the ref problems, not only us, or just him, it's a lot of it with the reffing. And just how they sometimes want to when you have a reputation, like it will go with you regardless, and it's hard to get rid of that rep. So I'll bring up somebody, for example, Draymond. I know he has a lot of technicals and all this other stuff, but Draymond, in terms of what he can gets to do defensively versus what a lot of other players get to do defensively, is way different because he gets a lot more leeway in terms of 50-50 ball, some calls that could be going either way. Because I've seen it where Jaren will make the same play as a Draymond Green or Anthony Davis, and he'll get the foul called on him. And you'll be like it's a crazy call. And that's what makes, like you said, like the other calls hurt worse, like the offensive fouls, because he'll get an offensive foul or two offensive fouls, be it two, and then get a bad call. And that's what makes the offensive ones hurt even more because it's just a culmination of things. So, yeah, it's definitely something you got to look at with him. Like, it's always going to be an issue. Not to say always, but at least now it's still going to always be an issue because I think people thought just because his foul rate was lower meant his foul problems went away. They never went away. They just got worse. Like, they improved, but even in that improvement, there's still a lot more work that needs to be done. So, yeah, he's got to stay on the floor. I mean, he's our second best player. It's going to be it. If Jaren's not on the floor for 30 plus minutes in the playoffs, we're probably not winning a lot. We might win a series. We've seen that. We won a series. But if you're talking about winning, yeah, he's got to stay on the floor. And so that's the thing he's got to figure out, and also the refs, obviously, but really him.
Yeah, no, and I think when you mentioned that part too, is that he's the second best player, obviously, but when you look at the stats and the on off numbers, he might actually be the most important player because when he is on the court, the Grizzlies are just so much better. He's top 5 in the NBA in net rating, and everybody else, I'm pretty sure, in the top 4 plays with Nikola Jokic. So it's
That's
like
crazy. That's crazy. I did not know that. That's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was before. I don't know what it is after the Chicago game. That was so I'll have to check it again. But I looked at it a couple of days ago, and he was top 5, and everybody else that was in the top 5 was Nikola Jokic, and then I think it was 3 people that were in the Nuggets starting 5. I think it was Aaron Gordon and Jamal Murray. So it's like when you look at the impact he has, it's when he is on the court, the Grizzlies are so much better, and it's on the defensive end too, because in the playoffs, we know that the Grizzlies are going to have to get it started on defense. They're going to have to be able to get stops, right? And they're equipped to do that when they have Jaren on the court. But when Jaren gets into foul trouble, we've seen the defense just completely, basically be non-existent. It's like the defense is completely different when he's not out there. Jaren covers up so much. And that's why I really say he's the most important player, because it's like without him, the Grizzlies cannot play defense at the same level. And that's the way that they've won games all season, is on the defensive end. And when you look at how like average or really below average they were, I think they were 20th in defense when Jaren was out. Santi Aldama did a great job out there, but it's not the same having Santi out there as it is having Jaren out there. It's as good as Santi has been this year. It's just not the same. So it's going to be really important for Jaren to stay on the court. And I think getting Steven Adams back, which we'll see if we get an update on him in the next couple of days going into this last week of the season, I think that'll help him. But he's also going to have to be smarter with those fouls. And like I said, especially on the offensive end, you got 3 fouls. You can't just put your shoulder into somebody on offense, because they know, like, they watch the tape too. Like, they know that that's the kind of stuff that you do, and they're trying to get you out of the game, because other NBA coaches realize how important Jaren is to what the Grizzlies do too. So that is what they're coming in trying to do. They're trying to get Jaren in foul trouble. They're trying to get Jaren out of the game because of how good he is. And he has to start coming in with that mindset as well.
Yeah. The thing about it, man, it's just like you said, it's not the same thing, man, when somebody else is out there. And I think the thing about it is, you just have to, like, he just has to figure it out. Because the thing is, it also goes to, like you said, him being the most important player, but also, I forgot to say it last time when we were talking about defensive player. That's why he is the defensive player of the year, because of the thing about it. Jaren, with the Jaren and Brook thing, Brook is part of the Bucks defense, but Jaren is the defense. And that's literally, and I'm not to say like Dylan Brooks doesn't have an impact on this and other people don't have impact on the defense. Like, Bane's a solid defender. Dylan's obviously should be probably an all NBA defender. Adams has been good, obviously, when he's played. Tillman at times has been good. Like, we have solid guys that can defend, but it's easier to have those, to play better defense and to be more aggressive and physical defensively and take chances because you have somebody like Jaren beside you while playing defense. It's so, for him, it's really about just figuring out how to stay on the floor. It's going to be a hard task for him just because, again, it's always been hard for him. It was last year. And the thing is, he overcame it, obviously, and was able to really have a big series, I think, with the Golden State series. But really, that Minnesota series, he struggled because they're going to attack him. Like you said, coaches know he's prone to get fouls. So they're going to try to attack him in any type of way, shape, or form. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, Draymond's really good at trying to bait him into fouls. Like, he did it Christmas Day. That's why he had such a bad game against them, because he was baiting him every single time. And it just effectively took him out the game. But the thing about Jaren, I always say, whether it's through games or, he have a bad first half, he usually learns how to bounce back or play through it. And that's what he has to do, because people got to understand, this dude's only 23. Not only just 23, I'm pretty sure he still hasn't played. Like, I know people talk about he's in his 5th year. I still count this as technically his 4th year, because his 3rd year, he basically played 10, 12 games. And so basically, he lost his whole season because of that. And for a position where he plays at, which I think is one of the hardest positions to learn and really, be able to be good at in the league, you need reps. And so for him, it's about getting all the reps he can, whether that's him playing with 5 fouls or picking up a chippy, and he has to now, playing with these fouls instead of Jenkins having to just sit them right away. He has to learn to play through this. Like, all of it's a learning experience for him still. And even in spite of that, he could win the Defensive Player of the Year, and he was an All-Star this year. Like, so think about that. So imagine if he does, which I think he will eventually. I'm not saying he's not going to foul at all. Like, his foul rate's not going to be at like 2.5. But if he can get it to like 3.12, and you could up his minutes to like 32, imagine what a difference that's going to make for this team, maybe, in terms of big stretches. Because he usually does have games, but sometimes he'll have games where we've seen in the last week where he only played 22 minutes. Because I think forgot what game it was. Was it I can't remember. Was it the Clippers game where he had the foul trouble, or it was one of those games he had foul trouble? He only had like 8 points, and then comes back into Chicago. Obviously, he had foul trouble. He had 30. Like, you know what I mean? And still, in spite of that, so he just got to figure it out, man. If he can figure out how to stay on the floor, man, I'm telling you, it's going to change a lot of things for this team. But again, it's a question. But I mean, that's not the only question they have. Like, they got a bunch of questions, but that's probably one of the bigger questions when you talk about the Grizzlies in terms of going into the playoffs.
Yeah, and it was the Orlando game he fouled out. I think that's what you're thinking of. He fouled out in that game, and he also had 4 fouls in the Clippers game. He played 26 minutes in both of those games, so he was definitely in foul trouble for both of those. But kind of going down into the next parts, we're going to have 2 more things that we're going to talk about, and it's all going to be about this last week of the season. And we're going to start with first what the Grizzlies need to be doing at this last week of the season in terms of, what they need to do to secure the 2 seed. How many minutes should guys be playing? Should they be resting players, stuff like that? And then we're also going to take a look at the play-in race, because even though the Grizzlies are not in the play-in race, obviously, if they get the 2 seed, which it looks like they will, I think they only need a win and a Kings loss in their next game, and they've basically got it locked up. But we have no idea who the Grizzlies are going to play in the first round. Like, absolutely no idea who the Grizzlies are going to be playing in the first round. It could be really 4 or 5 teams. So that's what we're going to talk about. But first, we're going to keep it with the Grizzlies to start. And the big thing I think about this, the next game that they have is against Portland, and basically nobody's going to be playing for Portland. They've already shut Dame down for the season, and if you look at the injury report, they've got even guys that you probably haven't heard of if you're a casual NBA fan that are not suiting up and are basically resting this game. So it's basically going to be Shaedon Sharpe and a bunch of other people. I don't really like when you look at who all is out. It's like this is every name for the Trailblazers that I knew. Even Keon Johnson, Tennessee Volunteer, is not playing. So it's going to be raw. But they just beat the Timberwolves a couple nights ago. We're basically the same team. So the Grizzlies don't need to go into this game and kind of. I think that they're going to come out locked in, especially after a loss. They should, right? But it's one of those nights where you cannot go in here and just be kind of lollygagging and expect to win. But the biggest thing is going to be these last 3 games of the season because they're all going to be on the road. And we know we've talked about it already earlier in this podcast. The Grizzlies have not been good on the road. They're going to New Orleans and they're going to Milwaukee, who has the best record in the NBA. And then they're going to Oklahoma City, which that game for Oklahoma City will also be extremely important. Now, we'll see. Maybe the Grizzlies will have locked up the 2 seed and maybe they won't be playing anybody in that game. We'll see what happens. I think if they have the 2 seed locked up, we'll see what happened the same as last year, where they're probably going to rest guys in that last game. Or if they don't rest guys, they might only play them, 25 minutes or something, and then let the younger guys kind of finish the game out or something like that. I want to be surprised. But that's only obviously if they have it locked up. But as of now, I think that they're going to get the 2 seed. I think they've got it locked up. They've got a 2-game lead on the Kings because the Kings did sell when I think that's another thing that makes the Bulls' loss hurt a little bit less is that the Kings sold and decided to lose to the Spurs. Shout out to Trey Jones, helped out his brother, 17, 11, and 10, triple-double. So Trey Jones, if you ever want to come to the Grizzlies, hey, you're good on our book because you helped us out on this one. But yeah, that was a good game for the Spurs to help out a Southwest division teammate. So, I would say opponent, but at this point in the season, they're not really playing for anything. So, but it was good to kind of see that loss not hurt them as much as it could have, because we could have seen it where, now the Kings are within a game and the Kings still hold the tiebreaker as well. So that meant that you got to be a game ahead of them.
I forgot about that.
Exactly. So that loss to the Spurs for the Kings actually helps the Grizzlies a lot, because now all they really need to do is win and hope the Kings lose one of their last couple games, and they'll have the 2 seed locked up.
Yeah. The thing about it, I think they could probably get it in what? Again, I am big on wanting to win 50 games because I think before the Grizz, I can't remember if I said it before the season. I think the prediction I had for them, like win record wise, like 52-30. I'm gonna pull up the tweet, but I said 52-30. And then once All-Star break came around, I think it was like 50-32 or 52-30. And I think they're right on it. I mean, I think they should win tomorrow. I don't worry about the Grizzlies at the Forum. They usually do good in the Forum. It's really when they're away from the Forum, and for them to have 3 straight road games, I'm a little bit worried because, like you said, these teams have stuff to play for, especially OKC that last game. So, it really just depends on if if they lock up the 2 seed by then, they might again rest somebody on that Sunday game. They might. I don't know. Obviously, the Grizzlies, I think they have a tendency to rest guys. They just rested like half the roster on last Wednesday. Basically, it's just Ja and obviously the rookies. That's basically what it was. And so I think for him, or I think for us, just really having to understand that they gotta be consistent on the road. They need to set a tone. I think that's really the biggest thing is about if they in this stretch, can they really be consistent? And the thing is, for me, I'm not really worried about the win losses too much. I mean, I am, but I'm not. But like, if they could get like 2-1 in this stretch, I'd be pretty satisfied with it. 2-1 in this little road stretch to end the season, I'd be satisfied with it. But I am confident they'll lock up the 2 seed. But I think that, for me, it's just about consistency on the road, and it's gonna be tough. I mean, Milwaukee might even though they're at 1, they still got something to play for because Boston's right on their tail. New Orleans is in the play-in. Like, these teams are gonna come out. Like, even Chicago. That's why Chicago, that game, they didn't lay down. Like, they're literally, even though they're 10th in the play-in and they already locked into a play-in spot, they can move up to 9, and that can get them a home game. I think they're only like a game away from that. So, like, they were playing for something. So, like, even though they were down like 20, they were at home. Like, They understand like seasons on the line. So like you give them a little bit of life, they're gonna take it and run with it. And these teams outside of Portland, obviously, they got stuff to play for. No, like so, they're not gonna you can't just go in these games think you're just because you're the better team or should be. Well, outside maybe arguably Milwaukee, you probably say we're better than New Orleans and OKC. That just because you are a better team doesn't mean you can just walk in and expect to win the game. Like going through the motions is what gets you beat. That's why they've had losses like that where they've gone through the motions and they just lost. And I can just tell when they're going through the motions. I can tell. It's not about the stats thing because you go look at the stats. Jaren had 31. Ja had a triple double, but it didn't have any real impact because of when those stats happen and when the runs happen. So you know what I mean? People got to watch. And so, I just think for them, I just hope they can figure it out because my thing is they're going to have home court. So regardless, that's their safety blanket. If they get 2, you're going to have home court at least 2 rounds. So if their mindset can be, hey, if we can just get 1 on the road and we defend home court, we're going to be all right. That should be their mindset because I know they've been bad on the road, but it's not like they haven't won any road games. They won a few. That Atlanta game they had last or the Sunday before, they were really good in that game to close that game out. They've had moments on the road. They just need it just needs to be consistent. And so that's really what I want to see this last week.
Yeah, and when you also mention moments on the road, we've also seemed to have moments on the road in the postseason last year. I know against the Timberwolves, they had that big comeback on the road and then closing the series out on the road. They didn't do as well on the road in the Golden State series, obviously, but they still had in Game 4 and Game 6. They had chances to win both of those games down the stretch on the road. So it's not like they have a history of just going on the road and laying down in the playoffs either. But I think that winning on the road is going to be important for them, not so much just because obviously they have home court, but you don't want to win every series in 7. You know what I mean? Like at some point you would like to win a road game. So that gives you a chance to win a series in 5 instead of 6 or 7. So I think that's the kind of thing that could be important for this, win those first 2 at home and then don't just be like, all right, we're all right. Try to get 3 or 4 so you can win it at home in Game 5. Because that's another thing when you look at last year, that Timberwolves series went longer. Their second round opponent, the Warriors, got more time off. They only had a day off between the end of their series while the Warriors got to sit at home for a couple extra days. And stuff like that when it comes to the postseason becomes very important. So I think winning on the road is going to be important. If they want to be a championship level team, they're going to have to be better on the road. But like I said, last thing we're going to talk about is the thing that I think is probably the most popular, podcast topic on any NBA podcast right now. And it's the Western Conference play-in race. Because also, I do got to say this. We do have to give a shout out to Ja. Because without Ja, is the play-in still a thing? Because you got to think about it. The first time that the play-in happened was in the bubble. Ja versus Dame. Now, the Grizzlies lost, but it was an awesome game. Ja had 35. Damian Lillard had a great game. All of that, right? And then the next year, when they're still trying to play in out and it hasn't been officially added to the NBA, the Grizzlies end up going into Golden State and winning and making the playoffs, and it was a great game. So I think, and when you really think about it, outside of that, there was also the Lakers and the Warriors game. That was a really big part of it. I don't want anybody to take this clip and be like, oh, he's just going to throw out that LeBron played Steph. No, I'm saying that happened too. I know that. But when you think about it, outside of that Lakers-Warriors games, the only player that I think of doing anything in any playing game is Ja. I don't like last year. I don't even remember what happened in the playing games last year, really. like let's be honest. Like I know the Timberwolves won, and I know that Patrick Beverley jumping on the table. That's the only other play-in moment. So shout out to Patrick Beverley too, I guess. But now that it's officially here, at the bottom half of these Western Conference standings, it's absolutely ridiculous. So basically, 5 through 8 is half a game. So the Pelicans right now are 8, and they could move up as much as to 5 by winning a game. So it's to the point to where there's really no telling who the Grizzlies are going to play. And then you also got to keep in mind, Minnesota is a game and a half behind the Pelicans, but there's still 4 games left. You never know what could happen. If they drop a couple games, maybe they could move up too. So there's really a lot of different teams that the Grizzlies could play. I think a lot of people have been talking about the Lakers and the Warriors, of course, because that's the big name teams, the big stars. And then I also think that the Clippers are a very likely matchup too. So there's a lot of teams to talk about. But I want to start with, what do you think? How do you think the rest of this Western Conference bracket is kind of going to fall into place when we go into this last week of the season?
Good question. Well, first to answer the Ja thing, yeah, I'll give him credit. I mean, I'm obviously going to be the person to give the other teams credit. Like, those other games were really good, and I'll say specifically the Western Conference games. Eastern Conference, I would say last year was really good. I'd say last year's play-ins was really good, like, because I think it was Nets, Cavs, and then Cavs, Hawks. But that 9-10, I think it was Hawks, Hornets. Like, those 9-10. Yeah. Those 9-10 games usually for the East are not great, but like for the West, they're pretty decent. But usually the West, they're 7-8, and the 8-9 game or whatever that last game for the 8 seed, they usually hit every time, or usually at least good it's good hoops. But to answer your question about how the West will shape out, I do think, because I'm looking at the standings now, I do expect the Lakers to move up. And I think if they win Wednesday, they move up to 5, if I'm not mistaken, because they do got the tiebreaker over Golden State. And then if they win that game, they'll have a better record than, obviously, the Clippers. So, or maybe, I think it really just depends on what happens Tuesday. But either way, that tiebreaker, if they still have the same record, they should have it. So I think they'll probably avoid the play-in. Clippers probably end up in the play-in. And this is hard, bro, because they all a game, and I'm just looking at like the standings. I'm really thinking about it. Sorry, Bryce. I'm trying to think about this, boy.
I get you. It's difficult. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard this year.
Yeah, like obviously OKC, Minnesota, they're gonna stay where they're at, I think, because Minnesota's a game under, and they just lost to the Blazers. So like once you lose that game, like you kind of locks you in where you're at, because I think the Pelicans and the Lakers are a game and a half ahead. So then you got I think Pelicans stay where they're at. So I probably move the Lakers up to like 5, 6, and then Golden State and the Clippers are basically going to be fighting to see who's not in the play-in. And so you'll have a plan of obviously the 3, OKC, Minnesota, New Orleans. And do you want a play-in prediction too, like who makes the playoffs too? Or do you just want who's going to
this is what I'll say. I'm gonna say who I think is gonna finish in each spot, right? So I think the top 3 is gonna stay the same, right? Nuggets, Grizzlies, Kings. That's gonna be the top 3. Suns are gonna be 4. I don't think that's gonna change unless they lose all the rest of their games, which I don't see that happening. I think that we're gonna get 4 or 5 Suns, Warriors. Lakers are gonna be 6, I think. Just because I think that they're gonna beat the Clippers without Paul George. I don't know which team is technically the home game, but it doesn't really matter because the Lakers are going to be the home team in that game, regardless of what color the court is, because it's the Lakers in Los Angeles. So I'll leave it at that. And then I think that the Clippers. I think that the Grizzlies matchup is going to be between the Clippers and the Pelicans. That's what I'm thinking right now. There's a chance for it to be the Timberwolves again, which I think that would be really interesting. But right now, I would probably say the Clippers. I'd probably say the Clippers are going to be the first round. And then the 8 seed, I'm going to go with a wild pick. And I'm going to say the Thunder are going to get the 8 seed. I don't know why. I just have a feeling like they're just one of those teams. Like I feel like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in that like 2-game winner go home scenario is just going to have some insane numbers. And I don't trust Minnesota. Like they haven't been good even with Cat and Gobert together. Like they never really had time to really find that rhythm. And then they just lost to the Trailblazers when they like I said, they did not play anybody in that game. So that does not give me any faith in the Timberwolves. So I actually think the Thunder have a really good chance of being the 8th seed. Now, they would have to beat the Pelicans to do that, and I'm not sure if they will do that, but I think it's a very good possibility.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see OKC making a run. I mean, it really depends on if they're gonna tank or not, because like Shea, they be sitting Shea for weird reasons. So, and you know, again,
Not as much this
Minnesota,
year. Not as much
yeah, not
this
as
year.
much. Yeah, not as much. But like, how they be like they like to do subtle tanking. But yeah, no, I'm not mad at that. It's just hard, man, because all these games, like all these teams are like literally separated by a game. So like the only team I have like confident in like being like their seeding standing is the Lakers, because they're playing literally. If you ask me who's playing the best basketball out of them, it's them and the Pelicans. But like, I don't think the Pelicans really have any tiebreakers over teams outside of. I had to look, but like the Lakers, like they're playing good basketball. Obviously, I give credit where credit's like. People don't want to talk about like Lakers playing good basketball. They made some good trades. Guys are playing like just got Brown back, so I think they're gonna get a top 6 seed. It's just about the other teams and where they match up. It'll be interesting to see, because it's literally gonna, it's literally gonna come down to the last day, like literally like the last day. Like it's going to be wild, like because you might see a team like, like I'm not gonna say tank, but they might be comfortable where they're at and rest got like I don't know, like other teams, not them, but like let's say they play an Eastern team, like it's gonna be crazy. It's gonna be wild, man.
No, and like and like I said, like we're playing the Thunder in that last game, Grizzlies Thunder last game of the season. If the Grizzlies have the 2 seed locked up, there's a chance they don't play. That could have major implications on the entire playoff picture if the Grizzlies decide to rest players that game and the Thunder end up winning. That could change a lot. And it also comes down to a thing of not like, and this is what I'll say, and I'll leave it at this too. I will never say that you should try to lose games to try to be in a different position either. Like I think that you saw what happened last year when teams did that in the Eastern Conference, and I think the Celtics actually were rewarded kind of by getting a sweep in that first round, because they decided, oh, we're not going to run from the Nets because we're worried, and that actually became a better thing. So I don't think there should be any kind of manipulation where you rest players to try to, like, the only reason I think they should be resting players that last game is not because, oh, they'd rather play the Thunder and the Thunder will move up. It'd be more just because getting guys actual rest, going into the postseason. That'll be the most important thing.
Yeah, and they'll be locked in. Oh, my fault. They'll be locked into the spot too, or should be.
Yeah.
Hopefully, yeah. They no way they'll fall under their seeding. But yeah, go ahead. My fault.
But there's also a chance that, if they drop one of these road games and the Kings win, that last game in OKC is for the 2 seed. So there's a lot of stuff that could happen. Like the entire Western Conference is really close. If the Grizzlies had beat the Bulls and had held on to that lead, we would have had to throw in the fact they technically can still get the 1 seed. Now it'd be very difficult, and I think the Nuggets would have to lose all the rest of their games for that to happen. But they could still get the 1 seed. It's not impossible. If they had beat the Bulls, there would have been a much bigger conversation for that, because they would have only been a game behind. But since they lost that game, I feel like that ship is kind of sailed now.
Yeah, I don't think they're getting 1. I mean, they could have again, but it was cooked. That's why it's funny. One of my friends, he said, I think he said something about like, because we lost, and then I can't remember if Jokic was already doubtful or not. But it felt like right after that game, or right after we lost, they were like, okay, like Jokic's not gonna play. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're like, okay, we don't gotta really worry about it. And they still end up winning the game. So it's just funny. Yeah, I think that 1 seed thing is gone. But hey, but still, for them to be literally in the same seeding as they were last year, and if you add context to all this whole season, and they're still number 2. I mean, listen, I'm not gonna say it's a win. Obviously, they want to. There's obviously you want to, as Grizz fans and everybody, championships is the goal. But you got to look at the journey too and be like, dang, like they really still got number 2 in spite of all this stuff that went on this season, injuries, other off-court stuff. Like they right back in the same spot. It might not be the same record, but I think that's a testament to the league more than the Grizzlies getting, worse or anything. Like I just think the league got better to some degree. So, yeah, for them to be 2 is still great. But yeah, I think they'll be locked into 2, and then whoever wins that, because I think it'll be that'll be the first game, or yeah, I think it's the first game. The 7 to 8 games are the first game.
Yeah.
So we'll know by because I think the play-in starts next week. So we'll know by the middle of next week probably who we're playing. I don't know because I don't think it'll be before we record the next one. But yeah, but we'll know. We'll know by middle of next week that who we're playing. So it should be fun.
sure.
It should be interesting.
Yeah, and then kind of to wrap this up is you talked about all the stuff that's happened this season for them to stay. I mean, Jaren missed the beginning of the season. When Jaren comes back, Bane goes out, right? Brandon Clark tore his Achilles. Steven Adams been out since January. Ja got suspended. All of this stuff happened, and the Grizzlies are still on pace to win, 5 or maybe 6 games less than they won last year. So I think that overall you got to take that as a win in terms of the regular season. Obviously, they're still playing for a lot more, and there's bigger goals going forward. But I think that for the regular season, you got to say that it was a success considering everything else. Hopefully, Steven Adams will be able to come back for the playoff run. But until the next week, I want to thank everybody for listening to this week's episode of the Next Gen Podcast. We will be back, as always, next Tuesday for more Grizzlies news and everything like that. Be sure to join Bluff City Media at bluffcitymedia.co/join to become a subscriber, $5 a month. All of that stuff like that will help greatly with everything that we do here. But until next week, we'll see y'all later.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Next Gen Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like and a comment wherever you download your podcasts. Head over to www.bluffcitymedia.co, where you will find comprehensive coverage of all things Memphis sports and how you can become an insider. We'll see you back here next time.